Hello everybody, today we're going to be patching the tire on the mini bike because if you recall in one of the last videos I drilled through it and so it's very flat right now. But luckily for us, there's a lesson in every challenge, which is great because otherwise I'd be really angry with myself for doing that. However, it should be a pretty simple fix, which is great because I really don't want to take all this off and have to take the chain off and the chain tensioner and all that. So we have our little hole right here, which is a little hard to see, but I think you can tell. And all we're gonna do is use this tire plug kit. Oh yes. Now I got this one for about 20 bucks. It's got, you know, the nice steel or aluminum maybe, I don't know. Some sort of metal for the handles. You can get these kits for, you know, 8 bucks or 7 bucks or something, but I want to keep this one in my car just in case, so might as well get the durable one. This did not come with it. It's just a little, one of those little knives, but you're gonna need it to trim off the rubber. So let's open this up and get started. All right, so let's take a look at what was in that box, that little container kit. So firstly, and we'll do it in order of how you're gonna use the tools, we got this guy over here, and it's just a metal punch with some semi-sharp edges. They won't cut you, but they're definitely a little rough, and they are spiraled. So you'll see when we get to the tire, but basically what we're gonna do first is run this in and out of the hole, and what that's gonna do is roughen up the rubber and give it a little bit of texture so that when we use the rubber cement, it'll have something to grip onto. This will also clear out any extra, you know, if you hit a wood chip or a nail or something, maybe some piece of it's left in there, so we want to get that out. That'll also do that. So the second step you want to do is actually take out one of these rubber strips. I'm not going to do that just yet because they are a little sticky, which is good. You want it to be stuck in the hole. But what you're going to do is take one of these and feed it through the eye of this tool. Now this is kind of like a reverse sewing needle. If you ever use one of those, a giant reverse sewing needle. So we're going to feed it through, and it's going to be out, you know, half on either side. And then what we're going to do is push this into the hole. It will fold up our rubber piece because we're shoving it in. And that's why it's a reverse sewing needle, because you don't ever start with the eye. But we're going to shove that in. This little slider piece just prevents you from going too deep. The other kits won't have this piece, and it doesn't really matter. It's just kind of there. It will probably come off if I wanted it to, but we're going to leave that on. So just before we shove this and the rubber strips into the hole, we're going to use the rubber cement to coat whatever strip we pull out, and that'll give it even more adhesion to the tire, and it hopefully won't come out. So let's take a look. All right, so we're gonna take our cleaner tool and we're just gonna work that in there. It'll take a bit of work, and especially on these smaller tires, I don't want to go through the other side. But we are in there now, quite a ways. So I'm just giving it a couple turns, clear out some of that rubber. And what you really want to do is go in and out, but this tire is pretty weak. And when I try to push it in and out, it just collapses. So that'll do it. So there we go. I'll get our plug, and it's nice and sticky. Break open the rubber cement here. So it's got a sealed lid, but if you flip the cap around, there's a little poker on top, and you can just kind of poke into it like that. It comes out. So we're just gonna go a little bit. Don't want too much because we don't want it to be super blobby. And I'll do it on one side because once it goes in that little hole, it's all gonna spread out anyway. So let's do this. We got our hole. See if we can get in there without the tire collapsing. Which may or may not work. Rubber cement smells super good, by the way. Just kidding. Smells pretty bad. All right, it's getting in there. Okay. Dang. Yeah, this is difficult on this tire because the thickness is so small. You know, if I kept going with this, I'd go right through the other side. But so this one seems to have worked. We got it in just like that. And then all you want to do is pull it real quick. So we're just gonna, wow, that was a little harder than I was expecting. But again, small tire, so not terrible. Now, we're gonna let this set for just a second because we did put on the rubber cement. We want that, give that time to bond and adhere to the rubber, but basically that's all. Now, the reason you needed that knife, this little guy, is because you have these little tabs sticking off now, and you want to chop those off right close to the actual treads. So we'll give this a second, and then we'll come back and chop them off. Alright, so I did let the cement dry while it was on the bike. As you can tell, it is now off. But when I tried to fill it up with air, it still had a leak somewhere, and I was like, what the heck? I set this really well. Turns out there was 2 holes. I don't know how that happened, or if it's one giant hole, like it went cut through that way, but I don't know. But threw another patch in there because, you know, you can get spares of these rubber things like 30 at a pack for real cheap. I don't know. So I was like, yeah, sure. If it doesn't work, I'll just take the tire off and get a new one. But so before we cut them, because, you know, if they don't work, we'll have to pull them out and try again. So I don't want to cut them off yet, but I do have a little air chuck. Ooh, all right. And we'll see if it pumps up a little bit. Come on. This is not the best tool. Ooh, but it works eventually. You do it right. Or maybe I'm just bad at it. Also possible. Alright guys, sorry to disappoint you, but tire plugs did not work. However, that is the proper way to do them. I just thought that these tires were tubeless, and they are not. They have a tube in there. So the difference between tubeless and tubed tires is fairly obvious to begin with, but then it gets a little more complicated. Tubeless tires don't have a tube, obviously. Tube ones do. But tubeless tires get seated against the rim, and so that pinch point actually holds in all the air because there's no tube to hold the air. If you have a tube tire, the tube obviously holds the air and it inflates and it kind of forms the tire. But if you get a hole in that tube, that tire is not going to seat to the rim, so it's not going to press right up against this edge, and it's not going to hold the air. So that's why it didn't work. But we did plug the tire properly, per the kit. So if you need that information, go ahead and use it. Otherwise, you know, don't use it on a tube tire. But other than that, we're doing good. Well, now that we failed patching the tire, let's just put a new one on. I was dumb, and I did not realize that the hub actually just comes apart, and we'll show you that in a second. But I had to cut it off because it had like an inner bead with a bunch of steel wires, and I just couldn't get it off. So cut it off. Long story short, we got a new tire and a new tube, so we'll be putting that on today, or we'll be putting that on now. It is a few days later since the end of the last video, or since the end of the last clip there, but it's actually really easy, so it's going to be stupid simple. So this is the hub after the tire is off, tire and everything. I tried to pry it off, so there's a bunch of scratches. Turns out you don't need to do that. This is the brake hub, and then we got the gear on the other side, the ratcheting system. So basically all you got to do to take this hub apart, it's just held together by these 4 bolts in here through to the other side. But first you got to take the brake drum off, and I loosened it already, but basically all I did is I took some screwdrivers, and there's a tool for this, but I don't have it. You put them in, and then you just start turning, and it turns off like that. So we take this off. Woo! And now we can get to the bolts. We'll get the bolts apart and it'll come apart and we can just put the new tube back on there. I'm sorry, the tire with the tube in it. One other thing to note is that the tube does come with a 90-degree inflator. Previously it was on this side, so it'll come out that little hole right there and we'll feed it up and into it kind of like that. So it'll be on the same side as it was before. So we got all the bolts off, holding the hub together. I did actually have to use a hammer. It's a little awkward trying to hold the hub while you're trying to get those off. So I kind of put the Allen wrench in there like that and flipped the whole thing on its side and then took a few whacks with the hammer. And that actually broke the tension on the screws and allowed them to come off a lot easier. So now, ta-da! It's a couple piece hub here. We can actually just leave this one in place because we don't need to move that one. But the whole thing spins on the gear. Yeah. So we'll leave that one in place. Then we want to make sure that we get our tube inside of our tire here. But we want to make sure that we're putting the little nipple on the correct side. It doesn't matter. It's just I tend to go on the gear side because if in fact you really can't get something down in there, you can line up the hole with the gear on the gear. Sorry, line up the hole on the gear with the nozzle that'll come out, and you can actually get nipple these air things extenders. And then you can have it come out here, but you'll have to take it off before you ride, obviously, because they won't always line up and it'll shear right off. But you can line it up that way, which is why I'm going to put it on this side. So we will go ahead and tuck this in here. Now it is a tube tire, so not really anything on the inside of the tire. We just want to make sure that it gets in there. Like so. Now I'm gonna get an air pump hose and pump it up real quick, just make sure that it all fills out in there and there's no kinks and all that. So let me go grab that. All right, we got the little pump, and on the tire it says fill up to 45 psi. So we're gonna do that. Probably just go a little bit less than that actually, because I have to deflate it anyway. But we'll take the little cap off and connect our guy here if we can. Okay. Let's see if we can pump it up a little bit. All right, looking good, looking good. I think we're going to keep it at that pressure. I don't know what it is right now, but we're going to keep it there because it's filled enough that it will maintain its shape in there, but it's not too filled that I can't move it around if need be. So we're going to keep it just like that for now. So then all we're going to do is take our hub, we'll go in this way, and we're lining up the, let's see if we can get you this. We're just lining up the air input valve with the hole, and we're just laying it right there because the other side of the hub will then come on top and clamp it all together. So we don't need to press anything, we don't need to get tire irons, we don't need to do anything. We just need to line up the slots. So we'll just get that a little bit better lined up. Put that one in there like that, and we'll put this one on there like so. And then we'll just put these screws back in and the brake hub back on, and we'll be good to go. All right, so we got the tire back on. I filled up the tube inside, so it's nice and hard now. It's nice and seated to the rim. Before it was fully pumped up, I could rotate the hub inside the tire, which is bad because it had this little piece sticking out, so every time I'd rotate it, it would start bending one way or the other. So got that aligned, pumped it up, and now it will not rotate inside the tire. It's got some dust on it here, but yep. So that's all there is to it. We're gonna put it back on, and we'll get the brakes all mounted up, put the chain back on, the chain tensioner, all that, and we'll be pretty close to finishing this mini bike. While we have the tire off, let's talk about brakes real quick. This brake right here is not a disc brake. Those are fairly modern. This is a drum brake. This is something that you would see on an old car, like this truck. This is a truck from the 70s. It's got some good old drum brakes back here. And they're called drum brakes just because they kind of like a drum. There's not really a disc like you'd see on your modern cars where it's, you know, calipers are pinching the sides. This is basically how it works, though on a car it'd be a hydraulic piston in here that opens and closes this. On this, it's just going to be a brake cable. So when you pull the brake, it pulls a lever, pulls this lever, and that lever changes the shape of the inside brake pad. So now all really that does is that it clamps along the whole surface of the drum. So if I put this on here and we give it a spin, that's pushing down too hard, but you can squeeze, and all it does is engages the brake pad on the brake drum. So that's really all there is to it. It's the same thing here as it is on the truck. The truck just has bigger pads, and it runs off hydraulics instead of a cable, but it's the same concept. So pretty trusty brakes, and you know, they've been doing that for a long time.